Okay, you ready?
Yep.
Okay, no oil pressure.
Welcome back to 0 to 60 and thanks for joining in. Today we're back on the S62 from E39 in 5 and going to we'll try and reassemble the engine back together after doing the rod bearings. Now unfortunately, I actually started this job over 2 weeks ago now. Time is going so quick, and the reason I didn't reassemble it straight away, because that was initially the plan. We were just going to pull it all apart, put the new bearings in and put it back together. It was because this little oil pipe got damaged pulling the top sump off. It doesn't look like much, it has been straightened, but that is not straight enough to go into its provision in the block. So I had to order a new one. It turns out it's a pretty common thing when you're pulling the top sumps off, and people recommend just having one of these ready to go. Unfortunately, I was unaware, so I didn't try and order one until I was ready to put the engine back together, which, being in Australia and an S62, there was none of these parts anywhere in the country, and the quickest I could get one was from FCP Euro in America. So that's what I did. I bought a few other parts, bits and pieces as well to save on freight, and that came on Friday afternoon. The downside is a lot's happened in those 2 weeks, and obviously not on this. So I haven't even looked at this since that last video. Work's just been crazy, so I haven't really been thinking about it either. And because we were pulling it apart and doing the rod bearings with an expectation of just putting everything back together in that same day or that same night, we didn't label anything. So all the bolts and everything that come apart was just put into a separate pile. So we've just got piles around the shed that I've now got to sort through and work out where they go. It shouldn't be too bad, but still, I would recommend, if you are going to do a job like this yourself, even if you are expecting to put it all back together straight away, it'd be worth getting some Ziploc bags prior, and then as everything comes off, put them in the bags and writing on the bags, just so that if you do encounter anything that stops you from putting it back together that same day or the next day, you haven't got to worry, you haven't got to stress, and everything's there labeled, and we'll tell you where it goes. So, I'll show you where it lives in the block and exactly how it's going to go back together. You can see that little hole there. That is where that oil pipe goes. This is the one that came out of the car. And it goes in about there and starts getting tight. So you can see how much is left out. And don't forget that the top sump has to sit on here, which is probably that thick. And then that O-ring actually sits inside the top sump nice and flush. That's where it seals. But you can push it a little bit further, but then it just gets tighter and tighter and harder to remove. So that was how far that one went in. Now here is the brand new one from FCP, and it just goes in. I mean, there is absolutely no wiggle room. It is it's like a perfect press fit, but without pushing very hard on it, it's gone that far in with only that much sticking out. So that's a much better fit. I'm happy with that. I was concerned that maybe when it was being pulled out, that possibly inside the block could have been damaged, but that was probably me just worrying unnecessarily. So I think that's going to be all of my problems solved now, and I'm just going to put it all back together. But before I do that, I can see some more oil has run down from inside of the block onto where the gasket sits. So I'll give everything a good clean again, and then yeah, start piecing it back together. So let's get into it. Now before I get into putting the engine back together, I'm going to change this engine mount, because you can see it when we actually took the subframe off, the bottom half just fell away from the mount. So I did get a new one when I bought the oil pump. So I'll put that in while there's absolutely the most access to everything as possible. And from there, then I'll start putting the engine back together. Okay, I've just put the sealant on the gasket. I've got the gasket in place for the upper sump. So now I'm gonna try and get it in without moving the gasket. Now this is the original tensioner for the oil pump chain, which I wasn't going to replace it, but because I couldn't put the car together straight away and I had to order the oil pipe from FCP, I just threw one of these in there as they had them. They weren't very expensive, and I just thought may as well put one on there. So I've just swapped that over. That's the new one on there now. It's actually got a similar amount of tensions. That was good to see that it hasn't lost much tension. The only real difference is that that plastic face there is perfectly smooth, whereas this one obviously has those grooves in there for where the chain has been running along it for quite a few kilometers. So that's another little thing. I've just thrown that on, and the upper sump is now all bolted and actually ready for the oil pump. So I'll put that on there. Dave, what's happening? Well, you guys, you probably noticed there's been a bit of a gap since the last shot you would have seen, which, to be honest, it just got a bit boring. We were literally just putting the parts back onto the car that we took off, so... let's be honest, they weren't just going straight on, we were learning how to put them all back on. Well, actually, it wasn't too bad, except until we got to putting the pivot arm back on. That was just a nightmare because we couldn't break the ball joint, which when we were taking everything off, we just pulled everything off, but it needed to come off. We needed to break the ball joint to get it back on, so... We had to go and buy a ball joint breaker. After reassembling everything, to then not be able to get that, to then reassemble it, it took a bit longer than it should have. But it's done now, so... And this is going to be the exciting part. This is where we're going to find out if we have fitted rod bearings okay, or if we cocked it up. Basically, whilst the spark plugs and the coils are still off, we'll fill it up with oil. What's that noise? Just the oil. Going in the funnel? No, coming out the bottle. It's a real deep neck. I was like, is that running out the bottle? I did check this unplug. But basically, we'll turn it over with no compression, no fuel either. I better make sure the fuel pump fuse hasn't made its way back in. And hopefully, I'm thinking it should get oil pressure. If the gauge fires up, the aftermarket gauge, we'll be able to see if it gets oil pressure. It's going to be an interesting moment. All right, we'll bring you guys back to the action once we start to crank her over. Okay, it's also got a fresh man filter. Well, I've got the one that was in the car. Dave, how many Ks do you reckon this filter had done? Well, because of the scare when I checked the other filter, like... 20. Yeah, it was like 25 kilometers. So this filter that's in here has not been in the car for very long, but I'm going to keep it clean. Well, not clean. I'm going to keep it away from dust and everything in this plastic bag, and we shall inspect that as soon as we've got time. We'll just see if there's any more metal floating around in there. Okay, so I've just put the battery charger back on. Not that we know what we're doing, but we're going to basically just turn it over without any of the plugs in, let it circulate some oil through the engine, just make sure everything sounds fine. It should spin pretty freely. We've got no spark plugs, no coils, and no fuel either. Yeah, this is the first time the engine has been turned over since we put the rod bearings in. Ready? I am ready. Just do a quick turn. Alright. Sounded fine. No knocks? No knocks. Is the gauge is working? The gauge takes forever to bloody to fire up. Anything flickers. I'll listen out here. Cool, okay, it's got power now, the gauge, so you ready? Yep. No, the oil pressure gauge just does not move at all. I'm going to try it again. Yeah. I feel like that's long enough. Yeah, sounds like an engine. So that's the first good sign that we didn't hear any knocks then. No sudden movements. Spark plugs in, see if it starts. Well, spark plugs and coils, yeah, the intake. But I'm still tempted to, even once the plugs are in, might do that same thing again, but without the fuel pump still. Okay. And see what it sounds like with some compression in there on the pistons.
sounds good to me. Right,
So
let's get these in. Okay guys, so it's taking about an hour, but we've got all the spark plugs in, coils reconnected, intake on. We haven't got the supercharger belt on, only because David's bought new drive belts for the engine, but didn't get one for the supercharger, because we've got to match it up. So it's just going to run at NA for a bit. And it's time to crank it over with no fuel pump and see that it all sounds okay with compression, if it's got any.
Okay, you ready?
Yep. It's cranking very quickly.
Yeah, it's like it cranks quicker with compression than with no plugs.
It hasn't been sitting on charge. I wonder if that's because like, that was cranking quicker than when we did the compression test, but the supercharger's not connected.
Oh, that's true.
So, and this is not that easy to turn over, so you're going to try and start it?
I'm just going to do that once more.
Yep.
Once this gauge comes good. Okay, no oil pressure from that, so I just thought it might, but it probably won't.
So fuel pump fuse.
Yes.
Alright, actually I'll pop it on charge for another few minutes while you do that. So we've got the fuel pump reconnected. We're just going to check the oil on the dipstick again, make sure it looks at the right level, nothing weird since it's been turned over. This is genuinely nerve-wracking. This engine is worth so much money.
She's still full,
Alright,
which is good.
it's nearly time to start her up.
It is.
So you're just going to start it and check for oil pressure? Pretty much?
I think so, yeah.
I think run it for a few seconds, make sure it gets oil pressure. See what happens.
Alright. Ready?
Yep, I'll shout out if I hear anything funny, and you shout out. Well, just turn the car off if it does. You got oil pressure?
Looks good.
Thank God for that, it sounds fine. Woo!
I can't describe how I was almost, because I've been beating myself up the last 2 weeks, I was like convinced, I'd almost convinced myself that something's messed up, that it wasn't going to work. But that it's actually, I think it's got more oil pressure than it did previously.
Okay. Do you want to show them the oil pressure?
Yeah.
I'll keep listening out.
That is amazing. At, yeah, just over 1,000 RPM, which I think that's plenty. In fact, like I kind of want to rev it and see what it does. Okay, I'm gonna kill it. Well, that's fantastic. I might check the oil again now that it's actually got oil pressure.
I think now we've done this, we are qualified YouTube engine builders.
Engine builders. Well, funny you say that, because there is an engine that needs building. Actually, there's two. There's two engines that need building.
Dave, I think that's enough. We're going to call this video here. We need to basically get this car to the panel shop ASAP.
Yeah, I'm gonna message him now actually and give him the good news.
So it's quite late here. We'll put the rest of it back together. We've actually got to take the interior out before it goes to the panel shop, so we've got a bit to do. But dude, congratulations.
That's awesome. That is awesome. Thank you very much to all the commenters, because there has been throughout the multiple rod bearing videos, people just dropping hints. Actually,
And they help. The comments really do help us.
It does help.
We're not qualified mechanics. We love all the help that you guys do.
and that's actually a really good feeling, getting that, hearing that fire up after ripping that apart and then breaking the oil pipe and then it being apart for 2 weeks. That was awesome. And of course, thanks to Shane and Woody for giving us a hand, getting everything undone, and the new bearings in as well.
All right, that's it, man. Let's get on with it. It's late.
Cool.
We'll catch you guys at the next one. Team S62 this time. It's actually running.
Damn right it is. It's just the beginning.